Kicking off.
Hello, folks. I'll just read out the opening statement. We're not actually live streaming right now, but I'll read it out because the meeting will be recorded and shown for subsequent broadcast. So welcome to this meeting of Inverclyde Integration Joint Board. This meeting has been held remotely and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcasts available through the Council's website. The Integration Joint Board is a joint data controller with Inverclyde Council and NHS Data Glasgow and Clyde under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act 2018. This meeting will be broadcast and recorded to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during this meeting will be retained in accordance with Council published policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Integrated Joint Board are reminded that they should follow the IJB's established meeting protocol, including around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received invitations to the meeting. Thanks for listening. That statement just seems to feel longer every time you read it out. So David Gould, who's usually our chair, as you know, is away at the moment and so unable to attend this meeting, so I'm just chairing in his absence. So I'll now hand over to Lindsay for item number 1. Thanks very much, Lindsay.
We can probably start from David Gould with Diane Boyd as proxy. Chair will remember the roll call for asking for declarations of interest. The following members please indicate they are present at the meeting either in person or remotely. Mr. Brennan.
Present in the meeting.
Mr. Moran.
In the chamber.
Mr. Quinn. Present in the chamber. Mr. Reynolds. Dr. Metcalf.
Present in person.
Dr. Ryan.
Present in the chamber.
Kate Rocks.
Present in the chamber.
Jonathan Hines.
Present in the chamber.
Kate Gibbon.
Present in the chamber.
Dr. MacDonald.
Present in the chamber.
Laura Muir.
Present in the chamber.
Dr. Jones. Gemma Eardley. Kirsty Reichel. Charmaine Elliott.
Present remotely.
Jonathan Quaid.
Present in the chamber.
Heather Davis.
Present in chamber.
Stevie McLaughlin.
Present remotely.
Diane Boyd.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Diane.
Sorry, just getting used to this system. I've not used WebEx before. Yes, I'm present here online.
Okay. Are there any declarations of interest?
No. Okay, thanks very much, Lindsay, and thanks very much to people who are joining us on behalf of others and not usually listening to this. It's great to have you here. So we're just moving on to item number 2, which is the minute of the meeting of the IGB on 12th of May 2025. That's pages 1 through to 6. Dr. Ryan.
Minor point, just on number 39, I'd asked a question about the fixed monthly progress update. Just to see, I've got a reply from Scott Bryan, which I'm quite happy with, so we're mentioning that.
Okay, thanks very much, Dr. Ryan. Dr. Metcalf.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just with 37 about the NDP strategy. So I think we had a bit of discussion about it, obviously, but my query was actually about the governance of the strategy, not necessarily about the services. So I know there's an actions come out, there's only action to submit the report on the governance structures, which I think would always be very welcome for all our learning, but if there was not a query about the governance of the services, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much for pointing that out. I think we've just to then with those amendments, note the minute of the previous meeting. Thank you. That takes us on to item number 3, which is about the voting membership of the IGB. Kate, are you going to talk to that today? Sorry, apologies, it's Vicky. Thanks very much. Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to ask the IJB to note a change in its voting membership arrangements, and that the Council has appointed Councillor Moran as the voting member of the IJB to replace Councillor Jackson, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So, I don't see any lights on in the room with questions for you, Vicky. I'll just have a quick check online, but I'm sure we'll all join a warm welcome back to Councillor Moran.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You don't have to kill the fatty calf. I'm on a diet.
Thanks. Thanks very much for coming back to the board, and thanks to Councillor Jackson, obviously, for the time that he was on the board as well. So that's great. We'll just note that report and move on to item number 4, which is the 24-25 draft annual accounts. I think I'm going to hand over to Craig for that. Thanks, Craig.
Okay, thank you very much for yourself, Chair. This is the draft annual accounts for 24-25. First, I want to just take the opportunity to thank the finance team, in particular Samantha White, Helen McGuck and Scott Bryan for all the excellent work that's been done here for the completion of the draft accounts. As you know, it's not an easy task. It takes considerable time and effort to get these prepared. Also, I want to say a special thanks to all the service departments and the SNP, all of them people who have assisted with the information that I was the President needs today. As you all know, this is a complex document, so I won't spend a lot of time going through it page by page. I just want to take some time out to focus on some of the highlights within the document. Our bottom line position is highlighted in the accounts as a £51,000 underspend. It's proposed today that this be added to our overall general reserves. On the health side, we have a break-even position. However, we've had overspends in prescribing during the year, and this has largely been offset by vacancies across the health side of the budget. The social care side of the budget has had a £51,000 underspend, and within this budget we have had overspends in a children and families budget, and this has been offset by underspends in adult care budgets and the use of the non-recurring parenting monies. A full analysis of the variances can be seen on page 9 of the accounts, and this ties in pretty much to the budget monitoring that we've had during the year as well. We started 24-25 with a total of £19.287 million in reserves, and at the end of this financial year we now have £17.161 million in reserves, and this is the reason why the accounts show a net deficit of £2.126 million, and this is purely use of reserves and a number of initiatives we've had during the year. Again, at full movement, these reserves can be seen on page 9 of the accounts. As I said before, we still have over £17 million in reserves, which will help us going forward. Most of these reserves are allocated to specific funding streams, but IJB members should note that included in the reserves, we have nearly £6 million smoothing and general reserves. And these are the reserves that will help us with the savings initiatives and plans, which we agreed as part of the March IJB budget, and that will help us in the years to come. It is not, as is normal as part of the accounts, we have highlighted in page 8 the final year transfers for the reserves, including the final year allocation of the total underspend to general reserves. We asked the IJB to approve this today. Page 20 shows our annual governance statement and highlights again that system of governance and internal controls has been viewed by internal audit has been satisfactory. Those of you who attended the IJB audit committee earlier on today will have also heard this positive news. Obviously, for payment, I can't go through every area of the accounts, but I feel that this is a strong set of accounts and it's got a strong reserve statement, and this will help us address our pressures, challenges in the coming years. As always, happy to take any questions anyone might have.
Thanks very much for that, Craig. I know that David Gould is the chair. I was really thankful for all the work done on that and was in concurrence with yourself about it being a strong set of accounts, and wanted to pass on his appreciation to yourself and the whole team here at the meeting today. I'm just looking around the room and I don't see any lights on there, and I don't think I see any on screen. So we've got a few things to do, as Craig said, just with the report that we're to note. The proposed approach were to approve the annual government statement, or to agree the audited accounts to be submitted to the auditor, and were to approve the transfer to earmark reserves identified in page 8. So just to confirm, yeah, and that we're all in agreement with that and happy to do that. Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks a lot, Craig. So that takes us on to item number 5, which is the rolling action list. And I think I'm going to take this time. Yes, if that's okay. Yeah, thanks a lot.
So there's a few actions that's being put on. Probably are more about sorting out meetings, so I'll just take you through them. So the first action is the work's ongoing, and we've got no time scale. I think that we want an update. Katrina is the mental health transformation, and it's still ongoing. There's not got any kind of date for final report to come back to the IJB. I think that the strategy we were keen to look at visiting their asylum hotel, and I think that's in process. The children and families, the report is already here, so I'm hoping that we could be able to close that. And that there was an agreement around a development session on the ADP strategy. I think we want to take that into a wider development session, because I don't think it will be a big bit of business for us. It will only be a 10-minute thing, really.
Yeah, I can come in and I think it's new discussion, but I agree. I think, other discussions that can be part of that, especially having come from audit, we've already discussed about 2 other different development sessions. So yeah,
and thanks for confirming that. And that we were considering that ADB strategy, that we were taking update reports on a regular basis. We might want to pick that up in that development session if that's still required, because if that would fit into the governance and bottom out the governance.
yeah. So I think the next few relate to my comment from a minute, which my question is about the governance of the strategy that was presented rather than the.
And I think we can pick it up there, and that the next item relates to that too. And we'll do an update report around the decommissioning of Inverclyde Centre, and that'll be September that we're looking at it, so we can update that. And Margaret's going to provide us with the report around the lens projecting, and that's being compiled. So that's the rolling action.
Thanks very much, Kate, and thanks for that available to make that. A focus on all these things is really important and welcome. So no, that's good and good to get covered there as well, however long it is. So thanks very much. That's us on to item number 6, which is the IJB and IJB Audit Committee proposed dates of future meetings. Back yourself, Vicky. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chair. This report is to ask the IJB to agree the timetable of meetings for the IJB and the IJB Audit Committee for the 2025 to 2026 cycle. Members will note from the report that it is proposed to again hold 6 meetings for the IJB, and 3 IJB Audit Committee meetings will be held in September, March and June. And I'm pleased to take any questions.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Vicky. I don't see any questions around the room or online, which is very relatively standard piece of business. So that's great. Thanks very much for that. Okay, so we're on to item number 7, which is the Savings 2024-2026 update, and that's over to Craig. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. This is the Savings 24-26 update. The enclosed report is an update on the progress of the savings, which I've agreed as part of the 2-year budget that was set last year. The paper shows that we've achieved the vast majority of our savings targets for 24-25, and this can be reflected in the accounts which we just spoke about a few minutes ago, and pretty much the break-even position that we had. It also shows the position of the progress we've already made towards making our target for 25-26. This position will continue to be updated and reported to the IJB via the cyclical IJB monitoring reports. The paper also highlights in a wee bit more detail each of the savings schemes and the progress made in each area, including areas such as commissioning, review of self-directed supports, and an update on all our major savings initiatives groups. As an SNT, we feel this is positive and shows a good progress we've made to date in savings. The paper also highlights the employees who have been successful in the VER process to date, and the requirement for the SNT to progress to the next stage of the VER progress via the new £400,000 target, which was identified as part of the budget process in March. Further details on the progress of this will be brought to the future IJB. Happy to take any comments or questions you might have.
Thanks very much, Dave. Dr. Ryan.
Thanks much. Can just on the review of senior staff and the voluntary redundancy, is that process now complete? Not looking for any more?
So that's one for yourself, Chair. That's one which is still ongoing. We've obviously had a number of people sign up for that, but we've still got to make the final target on that one. So we are meeting as an SNT next week to discuss that in a wee bit more detail, and also specifically around the new VER target 400,000. So that work is still ongoing, but we'll be able to bring an update to that hopefully to the next IJB.
Okay.
Thanks, Craig. It's a really helpful paper. Easy to follow and understand for me, so thank you. And I was just going to say that I think an update, we've highlighted the areas that I was kind of concerned about reading through with the voluntary redundancies, but maybe I've already had savings as well. So just, yeah, thank you. You already said you will bring updates, but I think that would be quite useful for us. I suppose just getting some assurances of some of the areas that may have had a sort of double hit where they've had savings and then they've had the voluntary redundancy. So that was just thank you for highlighting that, and that would be great.
Can I just provide some reassurance then? When we sat down and looked at the savings, we were very careful that we weren't taking out a double whammy. So we find that most of the posts that are growing, they're correlating service or team wouldn't be having to deliver a savings target against it either. So just to provide that level of reassurance that we're not taking it out the same system.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. So we're in the room. I think I'm happy to note the progress of the savings work streams and the progress of the VER process. Okay, thank you. That takes us on to item number 8, which is a paper on the Healthcare Scotland Staffing Act 2019. I'm going to hand over to Laura on that. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this paper's really been brought today for the IJB to note the paper and its contents. It just lays out a little bit of background and context in relation to the Healthcare Staffing Act. This legislation is in place to give us a statutory basis for the provision of appropriate staffing, and very much about enabling safe and high quality care and improved outcomes for our service users. The Act came into force on the 1st of April 2024, and there's been significant work going on across NHS GGC during that period, and we've also set up our local programme board, which has been meeting regularly. We had to submit our first Q4 report in the middle of April, which went through due diligence, and feedback received was positive with only minor alterations. On an ongoing basis, we are required to submit quarterly assurance reports through to the board, with the next one, the date's now been confirmed to go through on the 15th of July, so that's going to SMT in a couple of weeks. In terms of care reporting, this is scheduled annually and is due at the end of June, and again, that's all absolutely in process. So for the report that we submitted for Q4 through to NHS GGC, the level of assurance that we achieved was reasonable assurance, which was what was expected in terms of the NHS GGC position, and absolutely aligned with that. There was a couple of areas where we had limited assurance in relation to health visiting school nursing, but those were areas we were fully sighted on through SMT and had absolutely mitigated all of those risks. There was another few 4 duties where we'd reported substantial assurance. These were all related to the common staffing method, again, all fully reported through SMT. So no surprises in any of that. In terms of our ongoing work in relation to this, obviously we're continuing to progress with that under the oversight of the Programme Board. Programme Board meets every 6 weeks and we are taking the reporting through SMT and then it goes through to NHS GGC. Our longer term aspirations for this work is that it will become embedded as business as usual. At the moment, it's still quite significant work for all of our staff, but absolutely we've got processes in place to manage that. So just recommended that the IGB receives the paper for information and that we'll carry on the governance processes that we've got in place, which are effective to date.
Thanks very much, Donna. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Ryan.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the report there. Can I pick up your last point? This is seen as additional extra work just now, and you hope to move to business as usual. What sort of timescales are that? Because it strikes me that everyone's on a learning curve here, not least of all the Scottish Government.
It absolutely is a learning curve. You're bang on with that, and we haven't had any feedback yet from Scottish Government that I've seen through from the Q4 information that went to them. So it'll be interesting to see the feedback on that as well, because obviously that could give us more or less to do board-wise. So I think for us, we've got a lot of actions that we're planning on having completed by the end of the year, but it is going to be down to the individual team's capacity in order to pull that together. We've got the SOPs that have come through from NHS GGC and we're working through them, but it's important that they're properly embedded within our teams, and I think that embedding and sustainability is an important feature of all of this, but we have got the work plans in place.
I think Jonathan, you're going to come in as well. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, through yourself. Just really to echo what Laura has said already, and I suppose from a local point of view in terms of how we've approached this very weighty piece of work is to develop the Programme Board, but very much jointly and joint chair between Laura and myself, just to provide that shared professional oversight, I suppose, really. As Laura says, the bulk of reporting so far has been on the health half of the partnership, and the social care report goes into the Scottish Government at the end of this month. I think the reference certainly to health visiting school nursing for the last year was a particular challenge, and I know we've spoken about this in this forum before, and that was really from sickness and some changes in staffing levels, but actually the tools were really helpful for us to be able to provide that assurance to SMT and to make sure that we were able to review the safe staffing and the common staffing method through that process until the staffing levels increased in those particular services. So I suppose we've had that early experience of applying it in action, as well as in terms of that broader governance approach as well.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
And just finally, obviously, the second bit of it goes in, as Jonathan had said, through the social work and social care, and the frameworks aren't as clear cut around the social work and social care element of it. So I wanted to kind of say that we're probably in a decent place to provide that level of assurance back into the system, but we are still awaiting other developments nationally, so that is embedded consistently across Scotland. So just to make sure, because I think we're fortunate to have common staffing tools in health, but not necessarily in social work and social care.
Thanks very much, Kate. Thank you. I don't see any more questions we don't print online, so thanks very much for that, Laura, and you're just to note the paper and its content. Okay, and that takes us on to item number 9, which is the HSCP Workforce Action Plan 2022-2025 progress updates. And that is over to Kate. Thank you.
Well, actually, it's over to Angela Raining, so she's putting her hand up and waving to. So Angela's done all the work here, but I would just like to introduce Angela, who is the service manager, who's going to take us through the action plan. So I'll hand over to Angela.
Thanks very much, Angela.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much, Kate. Good afternoon, everybody. The purpose of this report is to provide an annual update on the HSEP Workforce Action Plan for 22-25 and also to inform members that work has commenced on a refresh plan that will align with the new strategic plan for 2024 to 2027. So in our current Workforce Action Plan, we have 25 actions as of June 2025, and we have 20 actions that are on track, and we have 5 actions which are complete. When we start work on the refresh workforce plan, that will be developed to align with our parent employers' plans, so Inverclyde Council's People and Organisation Development Strategy, and also NHS GGC Action Plan, as well as government guidance. The next step is to continue monitoring and progressing current until the new plan, and we intend to bring the new refreshed workforce plan to members before the end, before the end of the financial year. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Angela. Thanks for that. Dr. Metcalf.
Hi, Angela. You did allude to it there. It's just worth noting that the GGC workforce strategy is due to be approved at board tomorrow, and for 25, 28, whatever. And looking at it, I think probably will be, and then be a new. My understanding is a new action plan from that, but it sounds like you're already aligned with that plan. But just be good to note.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Kate.
And just to reassure you, Dr. Metcalf, we met with the person responsible in GGC, and he did a quick look at our plan, and he felt that it was, consistent with the plan. So it's just how we then organise it and ensure that we've got a read over, but there was nothing that was jumping out that was quite different from the plan. And he met with myself and Angela.
Thanks very much. Thanks. I think that's a really great and useful report for us to get, Angela, because I think obviously it acknowledges some of the workload pressures and the challenges in workforce planning. So obviously lots of us will have seen, I'm thinking in the local press as well, about the threat to the neuro rehabilitation unit at Inverclyde Royal, and the reasons for that are given at the moment are the staff cover, the staff shortages. And I know we've seen in this report that you're trying to do things here to kind of tackle that and mitigate it as much as possible. But the things, that you're saying have been successful, like the linking in with the universities and the grow your own. I just think that's really useful to see that you feel you're having some successes, but there are still, it does seem to be quite a challenging environment. Is that correct?
I'm happy to come in here. So this relates to the Health and Social Care Partnership.
Yeah.
The Inverclyde Hospital is part of the bigger acute service, and the resilience of that and the management of the resilience sits there. But it is about how we work together as a whole system and look at some of the learning from the whole system. There is a national shortages of nurses. There's a national shortages of everyone in the public sector, right from social care, social worker, right through. And I suppose it's about how we will have to come and continually to reprioritise where we are and what we can deliver across GG&C. There's probably more resilience in GG&C than there is in smaller health boards. So I think we would just have to recognise that. But within the HSCP, we're able to kind of do it within the parameters that we are statutorily able. So for social work, it sits in Jonathan's fund, and which is delegated to the council, and we are able to put local fixes, but we're still challenged with the recruitment and retention elements across health and social.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, because it is really good to see in this report some of the work that you are doing locally that does seem to be having early signs of having an impact. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Coming through, just to echo what Kate said, I suppose it is that local approach to a national challenge, particularly with social work, and Angela's update report very helpfully captures some of the activity that, again, members will be familiar with here through the the Grow Home scheme for paraprofessionals, and the financial support for final year master's students as well. And I suppose all of those elements have really helped over the past year to address some of our really significant social work vacancies that we had over the past year, but we've seen some really good and positive impact of those measures. And I suppose it's not just about recruiting, but it's retaining those staff as well, which is considered privately for us.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Councillor Moran.
I think, Chair, it's just on page 52, it says, utilise the market facilitation and pay terms and conditions across a range of commission services, which, you know, I'm broadly in favour of. But my question to the team would be, you know, what happens if we had a problem regarding recently there's a care home decides it's going to close down and we're going to find spaces for people quickly. So are we confident there is out spaces, and also just as confident where they do go, they're in line with our fair work practice and ethical charter?
Thanks, Councillor Moran. Kate.
Yeah, so we have contingency plans across the board in the event that we end up in situations. This is not an unusual situation nationally. It might be a bit unusual for us in Inverclyde, and we've worked very hard to ensure that the impact of the residents are given their number one priority. So we've really balanced our responses. So you'll see that our delayed discharges are up a bit, and that is the reason, because we're focusing on resettling our residents that are within that care home. So we are quite well practiced, and we're doing very well in it, and we hope that we will be able to meet the timescale of the closure. So just to provide you with that reassurance.
Oh.
Thank you.
No, thanks, Kate. I just didn't know, you see nationally the care home providers are saying that they might go out because they don't get enough money, you know. But we've obviously got our ethical charter which we adhere to. So I just hope that, you know, we're in a good position going forward if we're at a buffer again.
Well, we thought we signed up for that ethical charter too. So I can't get into the details here, but that isn't an awareness, just the reasons for it. But we would kind of sign that up and we apply the standards to all our placements within Inverclyde.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Okay, so we are to note the progress made since the last update, and thanks Angela for filling us in on that. And we're also to acknowledge that the planning group is developing a fresh workforce plan, and we'll get that presented to us collectively early next year. Thanks very much. Okay. Okay, and that takes us on to item number 10, which is the Scottish Government Alcohol Drug Partnership Annual Reporting Survey 24-25. Katrina, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just start off with an apology? We've had several changes within our admin and ADP. We've also had some absence. So there's there's words in this report that are incorrect, and that we will correct. It was just we didn't notice them until after they'd gone to the printers. So apologies for that, and I'll go through what those changes are as I go through the report, if that's okay. Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to present the Inverclyde Integration Joint Board the proposed Alcohol and Drug Partnership submission for the Scottish Government Alcohol and Drug Partnership Annual Reporting Survey for 24-25. The actual submission for the survey was the 13th of June, so we have submitted a draft submission at this moment and noted that due to timetables and timescales, our IGIB wasn't meeting until this week, and that should there be any amendments, we would go back to them, but the draft submission was forwarded by the due date. Recognising the links between the Alcohol and Drug Partnership and the importance and the part it plays in community planning, structure locally, and the fact that we are just one member of that community partnership, The report will also be submitted to the Inverclyde Alliance Board for their endorsement. So at 3.5, as I said, we have submitted a draft report and we will, pending, and this is where one of the corrections are, it notes pending approval, but it is a pending sign-off, and the sign-off is the fact that the IJB is able to note the contents and have seen and had the opportunity to discuss the contents. We have went back to Scottish Government about that because that hasn't happened in the past, and actually the governance for the ADP sits within the community planning partnerships, not the IJB. And it should be noted that the annual report and survey does not require the submission of any numerical information to provide additional context. However, for the Integration Joint Board, we thought it was probably important just to highlight that for the period 24-25, several projects under the banner of the ADP have supported between 3,000 and 5,000 individuals and their families with activities ranging from prevention to treatment and recovery. So the Inverclyde submission of the Scottish Government Alcohol and Drug Partnership Annual Report and Survey is attached to Appendix 1, and the Inverclyde Integration Joint Board is asked to note the content of the survey for submission to the Scottish Government. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Tina, and thanks for helping us through understanding a couple of amendments and the reasoning behind that. That's greatly appreciated. Thanks very much. Councillor Moran.
Yeah, I did bring us up a line, but it's on 3.7 again. It just said you should know the annual report did not require submission of medical information. I mean, and then it goes on to say the support box is 3,000 to 5,000 people. I think that's a wee bit ambiguous, to be honest with you. It really not straight on me exactly how many people are treating or what the treatment is, or where they've been treated, or what they were treated for. I think it's, to me, it's ambiguous. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but certainly to say between 3,000 and 5,000 individuals from the support of the Inverclyde, and there's no numerical numbers, to me, it's just not enough, to be honest with you, unless I'm missing something.
So I think it's the difference between what the content of the survey is, to go back to the Scottish Government, and the difference between what the ADP annual report would actually provide, where we would provide much more detail around some of the activities and some of the people that we've reached. This survey, the survey itself, does not provide space to provide that numerical data. And actually, when you go in and you do the survey, it's very, very difficult to put free text into the box because it's tick boxes or it's limited space within the text boxes. So when we're saying the numerical data, they're not requiring numerical data, it's only for the purpose of this survey report. The reason that we've got 3,000 to 5,000 there is because we have a number of individuals, but then we've got extended family members, and it's quite difficult sometimes to quantify how much of the extended family members are actually engaged in some of the activities and the family support that we offer. So that was data that we were able to pull very quickly, just in terms of some of our contract information and some data from some of our other providers around the variance in what they could provide. And I think the other thing probably worth noting, and the reason for such a wide range, is we have a number of people who will engage and then disengage and then re-engage. So it does make it quite difficult at times to get an accurate number of the people that we're supporting at any one time.
I think I mean, if we just look at the bullet point, if you look at that, then maybe what it says, the Alcohol Drug Partnership Annual Report and Survey considered by public documents and are generally expected to be held online with the public. Once approved, the product by the Alcohol Drug Partnership website. I just think that the 3.7 should explain it to me. I think if somebody's reading that would find it difficult to find out exactly what we're talking about. If member of public look at that, it's okay for me getting an explanation here, but you know, some of the Republicans looking at the food bank, which are happy to get a further explanation.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Moran.
So I don't disagree, but I think Eugenia's trying to outline that we're at the next stages of a survey that's not particularly well constructed, and it doesn't allow us to tell the story of Inverclyde, which is probably a better story than the way that we've had to fit around the boxes. I'm quite happy for the lead officer to go and bring the comments back from the IJB back to Scottish Government around that, because first of all, the governance wasn't right. Okay, it wasn't from the IJB approved. You can't agree the actions for Police Scotland and the Scottish Fire and Rescue, or even education as part of the council. So it needs to sit at the Alliance Board. The Alcohol and Drug Partnership, as you know, Councillor Moran, is a subsection of one of the groups within the Alliance Board, so that gets fed into the Alliance Board. So we will feed that back, and we'll probably maybe want to pick up the issue of alcohol and drugs within our development session about what would help the IGB to provide that level of assurance around the level of activity. But to be honest with you, we do a lot in that space, and we do a lot in that space in partnership with the third sector, and we see ourselves continuing to do a lot in that space. But we'll try and get something, we'll get perhaps more of a conversation about what would help, but bear in mind the actual governance sits within the Alliance Board too.
Thanks very much, Katrina and Kate. So I think when the focus comes through our questions and our inputs, just because we really have that focus as a member here, isn't it, on seeing that reduction in harmful drug and alcohol use. And Inverclyde, it's just because I think people care about that so much. I suppose, just to follow on from that before we move on to other questions, I think it's, would you say though that you could, I think you'd say you could give us assurance that quantitative data and those numbers are there in places, but it's just that they've not necessarily been drawn out in this particular survey?
Well, the survey didn't give us any opportunity, so it wasn't looking for the numerical elements, which is usually surprising, because normally when we put back a survey, the general Scottish Government wants to know the quantitative elements, and in many respects it's more a qualitative return than a quantitative one. But we have lots of data, so we're happy to have a discussion at the development day what would help IGB in terms of, but remember the governance sits around ABRS, Alcohol and Drug Recovery Services, as opposed to the wider ADP, and I think we need to have bottom that out a bit more, that we can't be completely responsible for the delivery strategy when there's so many other partners that are responsible for it too, and that the actual government sits within the community planning partnership, which is known as the Alliance Board.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Kate. Katrina?
Can I just also say that all of the contracts and all of the awards under the ADP, so that information around, you know, how many families, how many individuals is contained within the awards, and that is fed back through the ADP in terms of what the outcomes and impact having been achieved as part of that funding allocation. So as Kate says, we will have the data there. It's just we were not able to put it into the survey.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Dr. Ryan?
Okay, thanks. You've touched on some of the questions about governance already, but this is just coming for sign-off. I think it goes to the ADP for sign-off as well. What's the role of the Alliance have to approve it finally? And secondly, a point of international the ADP annual report, does it come to the IJB for noting at some stage in the future? Because it'll have all the statistics in it then.
Yes, it does, but it's not fallen into the schedule because it's been out of sync for a few years.
Yes.
The ADP, there's been for a variety of reasons, but it should come here for noting, so that you can see the contribution, and bearing in mind, as Katrina has said, that we are the bank of the ADP, which is the HSCP, in terms of the strategy, but the Alliance the community plan and partnerships, which is health, social work, no health council, which are an SU, and police are the ultimate sign off, and that's where it sits at the Alliance. And final sign off.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Katrina.
Can I just add that this survey has been to the ADP? It went on the 19th of May. So, as I said, we had to submit a draft submission to meet the due date, but we did advise that it was draft pending the discussion at IJB.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really helpful, thank you, because I think that, and that feedback on that governance as well, because it's just quite shocking for us to sit and approve something that we actually don't have the support of that ground for reporting. So that's really helpful. I'm just out of interest, and so remember what they went through last year as well. Do we actually, obviously we're putting out, do we get feedback on the survey? Because I agree with you, we can give our feedback. I think it's a bit, but they know, okay. So it's really a one-way street. So. Okay, thank you.
You're like so
Sorry,
time, but
apologies, sorry.
okay, thanks very much. And obviously, it's goes without saying that a huge amount of work goes into a lot of reporting around this from council, HSCP partners, stakeholders, and people with lived experience. So just to acknowledge that and recognise that. Thanks very much. So we've got a couple of recommendations for items to note on page 70, item 2.1 and 2.2. Thanks very much. We're on to item 11, and that is children and families redesign, and specifically the foster care fees. I'm going to hand over to Margaret to talk us through this paper. Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. So on the 24th of March, IJB members considered and reviewed the children and families budget pressures, and you've heard about those earlier on today within the broader context of the budget. And it's clear that there are increasing costs in external provision not provided directly by Inverclyde, fostering or residential services for children who need to be safe and nurtured away from home. Ongoing work has identified the need to increase the number of local fostering placements, and this report really takes a strong lens on foster care as part of a broader strategy of family-based care and family-first approach. And considerable work has been done that has looked at benchmarking our fostering fees and comparing those with other local authorities. And that really highlighted that we're one of the lowest nationally in terms of fostering fees. And that impacts on our ability to recruit local Inverclyde foster carers for Inverclyde children. But you could also argue it has a direct impact on retention, as you'll see further in the report. This report highlights rightly so that this is part of a broader transformational redesign strategy to safely keep children in Inverclyde at home with families, with their kinship carers, or indeed fostering families, in terms of rebalancing the care that they need. We know the outcomes. Research evidence is very strong in this area, that keeping children local and family-based care tends to provide better outcomes in terms of connections and identity with schools, friends, community, and indeed you could argue lifelong links. The 3.3 highlights, as part of the transformation, the investment that Inverclyde Council has made in terms of £700,000 for 25 to 26 to support with that rebalance of care transformation journey that we're on. And indeed, this is going to be increased further to 1.3 and then 2 million in total over the period of 26-27 to 27-28. Spoke about the rebalance of care. You can see that in figure 1, 3.4 and figure in 3.5. That highlights our high use in particular of external residential provision. The report goes on to further highlight some of the pressures in that we are increasing the number going into external fostering provision, because locally, internally, our numbers of local foster carers have been decreasing over the past 2 years in particular, and there's a 41% decrease. Now, the numbers are small, but because we're small, the percentage increase does seem quite significant. So that pressure is not only potentially impacting on outcomes for children, but feeds into a bigger budget pressure, because the cost of an external fostering provision is double on average. You're looking at £64,000 per year, whereas local internal fostering, it can be half of that. And if you then think of that broader strategic balance of care and children that we can't place in foster care for all sorts of reasons, including sometimes there is no provision, not always, but sometimes, one external residential care option minimum is £250,000 per year per child, going right up to £350,000 plus in some situations. So you can have a small number of children but be spending many millions of pounds in a small group of children in external provision. This is why it's part of a bigger transformation redesign strategy to keep local Inverclyde children in Inverclyde. Now, we're talking about the fees. Inverclyde absolutely complies with the Scottish recommended allowance in 2023. So the allowance is the full allowance in Inverclyde, and that's the day-to-day costs of the care of the child, food, clothing, essentials, but we're talking about the fees. And there is an example in 3.10 that illustrates what I was talking about earlier in terms of Inverclyde being one of the lowest and no development of that fee for many, many years. When you look at 3.10, an average could be that a foster carer currently would be paid £195.75 for 1 or 2 children in Inverclyde just now. But in terms of neighbouring authorities, the skilled fee for caring would be £300 per child. So significant disparity locally here when we benchmark across Scotland. 3.13 in figure 2 sets out the option appraisal that officers have undertaken per child, and it highlights the range of options from simplifying the fostering fee to 300 to 325 to 350 per child per week, recognising that we absolutely value foster carers in Inverclyde. We want to retain them, we want to recruit them, and we need to acknowledge the work, the love and the nurture and the stability that they provide for children who have experienced trauma and vulnerability and are there for care experience. So figure 2 in 3.13 sets out the options, it sets out the weekly, it sets out the annual cost for our existing carers, of which there are 20. And then it adds to that our ambition as a minimum, and I must stress it as a minimum, as part of an overall strategy to recruit and retain in the service, of recruiting 5 additional foster carers. So your existing and your additional, and you'll see the total figures at the bottom. Now, what we're recommending is that we absolutely, in terms of valuing the care that foster carers do, the ordinary, doing the extraordinary every single day with some of the most vulnerable children, we are recommending option 3. So that would be £350 per week per child in Inverclyde. And then you add the 5 additional carers or more potentially, but we are estimating that at a cost of £350,000 per year. And I suppose I've spent a bit of time talking about the economic cost, but of course, much greater than the cost is the human cost. We know there are better outcomes for children if we can recruit and retain our foster carers locally. Those outcomes you can actually put a cost on. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Margaret. Dr. Ryan.
Thank you very much for that. I think there's no doubt it's the correct direction of travel, particularly in fact they've got funding assured for it, makes it even better. You mentioned that there's been a reduction in the number of foster carers over the past few years. Do you have any indication why and whether there's any intelligence with their liable to improve matters?
There are a number of reasons why, and it reflects broader complex challenges nationally. This echoes some of the information you were hearing around workforce planning. It's not dissimilar nationally. Just about every local authority are struggling to recruit. It's not all about fees, but our analysis is clear that we are an outlier and we need to strengthen that offer to recruit and retain. But some of the research certainly that we've looked at and the listening locally is families are changing. That traditional concept of family where you may have one stay-at-home parent looking after the children, it is different. So families are changing, families have different needs. Families are under a lot more pressure now with cost of living crises, health, well-being. There are huge societal pressures which place broader pressures, not just nationally, but in us locally. What we know in terms of recruiting and retaining foster carers is you need to have a very strong offer in terms of that families can afford to foster, and not just that, they're heavily supported in terms of their fostering role, in terms of their health, their well-being, their development, how they look after the child and care for the child. So that scaffolding of support is really crucial. So you need to have a really strong integrated recruitment and retention offer. And even when you're doing all of that, because of societal changes and societal pressures, it's still really challenging and difficult.
Thanks, Margaret. Jonathan. Jonathan first and then yours.
Can I just one question attached to that there? If there's approved, how are you going to advertise all this?
Yeah, I think we'll cover that, and I think also the officers will say that some of that work I think is already ongoing. I think, but yeah, I'll hand over to Jonathan first.
Thank you very much, Convener, through yourself. And I suppose just to pick up on Margaret's response as the previous head of service, whenever we started this work at the turn of the year, what we were noticing whenever we looked at the national trends was very much echoed in Inverclyde, where through the pandemic, nationally we saw a significant number of fostering households choosing to stop fostering. Some of that, as Margaret's highlighted, will relate to the cost of living crisis, but also the experience of COVID overall, and the real challenge that foster carers found nationally through the height of the pandemic, particularly whenever more vulnerable children were at home more often, but also, and it's referenced in 3.7, we've seen nationally the number of households coming forward to be registered as foster carers has continued to reduce over the last 5 years. And actually, I think it was 2 years ago, it was the lowest number of new registrations since records were held. So we have seen that picture really significantly impact on the capacity nationally of locally registered foster carers. I think for Inverclyde, we've had a really strong and committed group of foster carers, many of whom have provided care to numerous children over decades. And I suppose there was a time whenever a number of our fostering households decided to retire, just based again on the impact of the pandemic. And I suppose it's a natural age and stage shift that we've seen, but of course it does emphasise even further the real demand on our existing foster carers and how that's passed through to the more expensive residential placements as well.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. I think, I don't know if anybody wants to come into Dr. Ryan's supplementary question about the actual sort of nuts and bolts, I think, of the recruitment. I know I've seen posts on Inverclyde Council's and HSCP's social media about how to get in touch and the real importance of local recruitment for foster carers, but I don't know if there's anything more that Jonathan wants to add.
I can come in again, just having passed that baton to Margaret whenever you come into post. But what we know nationally is that generic advertising campaigns don't tend to produce significant positive results in terms of attracting new fostering households. So we have been looking at how we develop a more nuanced, digitally led campaign, but also looking at our own population in Inverclyde, where we know, for instance, that the council is the biggest employer. We know also that there are really strong family connections in our local communities in Inverclyde. So we've got a slightly different profile to some other areas, particularly within the west of Scotland. So there are elements there that we want to capitalise on, but we're also looking more broadly, not just at foster care, but in terms of supported care for older young people, and looking at our own workforce, where some of our young people already have existing positive relationships with staff. So we're trying to take those very creative approaches, not just going out generically, but of course we will have that offer to our local community. But we're also really aware, as Margaret said, of the need to be able to provide a really competitive fostering fee, particularly because if you live in one area, you can actually register in another area. So we need to grow in terms of our foster carers as well.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. I know we've got Diane, whom I'll go to soon, and then Councillor Moran, but I think just, it's a really, really welcome report, and really big thanks to Jonathan and Margaret for talking us through it. I think, as you said, Margaret, so well, that there's the cost and the financial recognition for such a vital job, and the cost of some of the external placements, but also that real need to do everything we can to reduce the disruption to the young people who have no other option but to be looked after away from home. So really welcome as well the fact that the council was able to make that important financial commitment that brought us to this stage. And I too was going to ask about the next steps as well, Dr. Ryan. But as you say, you're looking at 5 people even to come forward and make that difference. And I think also it's worth recognising that we've had really positive reports recently about our young people's centres, where people are looked after in that type of location, that plays an important part too. But this is about looking at an extra part of what we are offering to young people, and really welcome it. Thanks very much. So Diane is next. Thanks, Diane.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come in to say that I really welcome the recommendation. I've a background in working in families and children, so I really know how important a home or a homely setting is for a child's well-being, and I can see that the increase in fee has the potential to be able to make it more viable for people to make the choice to be a foster carer on a more full-time basis. I've got a child myself who's neurodivergent. I know the amount of time that gets given over to phone calls from the school and, all sorts of things like that. So, sort of having somebody able to, I guess, be recompensed sufficiently to be able to kind of respond to all of the challenges that might come from fostering a child who's had a difficult background. I think it's a really positive thing. So just to say that I would welcome it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Diane, and it's great to get that extra insight there that you've added. Thanks for that. I'll hand over to Councillor Moran.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I do welcome the report. I think it's not before time we started recognising the great job that the foster parents have done for our area. But my question would be, at the budget meeting this year, we did allocate extra money because we've seen this coming. And we're talking about maybe, let's say, 5 extra foster carers here. And if one of them is default, then we're going to look at a foster with another £64,000. So my question would be, this is a strategy, but is there any plan B to this strategy? Because there seems to be, if we don't get the people to come forward, then we're going to be right back where we started. So what other things are we doing to make sure we don't fall back into the hole we're in at the moment? You mean, it's, you know, it's a strategy. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, we're back to where we started. So really, what are things we're looking at?
Thank you, Kate.
So, I thought I would come in being the chief officer. So this is just one of many strategies. So our strategy is about having much more strength-based approaches with families and ensuring that we have early help. So the strategy doesn't sit in isolation from our front door. So you'll have heard us talk about our family group decision making that actually is trying to redirect families or children into formal statutory processes and allowing families to make the decision with support from third sector national organisations, right through to ensuring that our mode of where we want to go in the vision for Inverclyde is family-based care within their own community. So this is the start of that, and when we start seeing efficiencies, and we think there is efficiencies here, and if we can grow our supported carers, we can reprofile who we think what our young people need and require as part of continuing care, we'll be able to build a system that's more congruent towards keeping children in their own community and family-based care. You can see that within our strategy, within the report, we were twice as likely to put children into residential care. And we know that the outcomes are much better in family-based care. So we still have the investment and there's still this room to grow. And the fact that we've provided that level of investment quite significant towards remunerating our existing foster carers, but recruiting new ones, we believe that that will be attractive, but also within the span of a whole system redesign, and that is well underway, and we hope to see different outcomes from that. And Margaret is working really hard. She's taken the mantle from Jonathan, and it's really hard trying to develop our workforce to ensure that our children stay within Inverclyde, but mainly they stay with their parents. So we're as opposed to that we are taking more children into care, because we would like to see a point that we're supporting children in their own homes.
Thanks so much, Kate. Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the report, and also welcome the reporting committee officers for spotting this, and pretty much it's one of those, you know, at the development session when we all seen it, it was a case of, you know, technical term, no-brainer, isn't it? Really, like, you know, so, you know, where we're potentially got foster carers in Inverclyde getting paid £10,000 a year for 2 children, and they can earn £30,000 a year, and then we would transfer that child across a border to pay them twice as much. It just seems crazy. So I think Johnson mentioned credit to our foster carers that have stayed committed to Inverclyde, clearly doing it for the love of it and not for the money, but we shouldn't be taking advantage that they're clearly doing it for the love of it. So all credit goes to them, you know, the ones that have stayed, because it's a very hard role, and I'm just glad that it's probably been recognised. The fee should recognise that it is a professional role. The amount of training they have to go through, what they, you know, in terms of looking after the kids and the self-development they need to go through, and that's constant and constantly under scrutiny. You know, and some of them, you know, potentially gave up paid work to do this role because of the love of it. So it is absolutely right that we recognise that professionalism and we pay people properly. So thanks for that. I think, you know, it's one of these, it's a pretty easy decision today. I've just got a question. I assume when we're paying them £350, that's us bringing us up to the sort of top level, so that we're still really competitive and going beyond. I think you mentioned 300 in the report. It's just to check that, you know, we're still a step up, that we don't get caught up in future years
And also, will we be reviewing that annually? You know, with any other kind of salary, will there be an annual review to check that we are still competitive? Because I don't want us to get into the situation again a number of years down the line.
No,
Thanks.
you're absolutely right, Councillor Quinn. One of the issues that we had is that we weren't given foster carers uplifts, and we've guaranteed that they'll get the same uplifts as our staff. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Margaret.
Thank you for those comments, and just quickly, without duplicating what Chief Officer has said, this is one bit of an overall jigsaw, but one important piece of the strategic jigsaw that comes together as a whole in terms of promoting family. It fits beautifully with the promise. This is the foundation of family, the foundation of care. So it aligns to all of our ambitions in that respect as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. So, we're asked to note the outcome from the analysis of the benchmarking exercise and also importantly approve the proposed increase in foster carer fees as per option 3 of the report. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, thank you. So we're on to item number 12, and that is the Chief Officer's report.
So I'll just take you through the four Scotland items, which is our mandatory delayed discharge, mental welfare commission, housing contribution statement, just to give you an update, and just some things around celebrations for the International Nurses Day and the Leading the Way, which is the new nursing Inverclyde strategy. So I'll start with the delayed discharge. We still continue to be one of the top 3 in Scotland. We have seen a bit of a rise, but of previously, things like one back earlier on in the meeting, we had some challenges around a care home, which we're supporting. But we believe it will only be a matter of time when we're back on track. Okay, and so that's where we are in terms of our delayed discharges. In terms of our Mental Welfare Commission, we thought that this would be really interesting for the IJB, considering the IJB approved this post. So this is going full circle. Last year we approved the new service manager for social work and mental health. This had been seen as an area for improvement around a mental health inspection 2 years ago, and we're now seeing the benefits of that. So we were at the point 2 years ago, our performance around our SCRs, which are not significant case reviews, social circumstances reports, okay, we've got the wrong acronym in here, social circumstances reports were probably the lowest in Scotland, and we're now sitting at 100%. So the difference that we've put that post into our management structure has made a complete difference, but also if you can see that it correlates with some of our strong performance around our delayed discharges, because our AWI's delays are the lowest now in GGNC. So we're able to get people into court within 3 weeks. So that's the other HSCPs would be very, very admire that. And that is a partnership approach between the new service manager and Sheriff Clark in Greenock, Sheriff Court, and the staff, obviously, who play a big part in that. So we see that has a positive contribution. AWI delays are, as they always are, they usually constitute 2/3 of all our delays, but we see movement where others, perhaps, in the system don't see it in the same way. And just the housing contributions statement is just to say that is getting updated, and that will come back in September. And these are the kind of outcomes that we're trying to look at, which is LHS outcome 2 and 3, which is then people are supported to live independently and easier to access sustainably. And that will be key performance measures against that. And finally, we thought we'd give you a couple of just our celebration of our International Nurses Day and the launch of the NHS GGC Nursing and Midwifery Strategy, which our chief nurse was heavily involved within the way, so you can see some of their stuff. So that's all I've got to update as the chief officer. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. I know we've got lots of nurses around the room, former nurses, and we've got nurses online as well, so I'm sure they'd be pleased to see that, and I'm sure they could tell us lots of ways to celebrate that particular profession as well. So thanks very much for your reports. I don't think there are any questions or comments about that either in the room or online. So yeah, we'll note that, Kate, and thanks very much for bringing that to us. Thanks, Karen. And that then takes us on to private business, which is agenda item number 15.